What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Nerd Vibes. This episode, I'm happy to be back. I'm going to give you guys a little update on life, what's going on, why we've been gone for so long. Okay, it's been about a little over a month since we uploaded a podcast episode. And I'm just going to say, hey, my bad. All right. First off, I did take some time off because it was my wife's birthday, beginning of May. And she asked for her birthday present that I take some time off. So that's what we did. So I just took time off and I was really just enjoying the time spending with my wife. So I just decided to take the whole month off because June and going into the summer, there's a lot of content. So, which we're going to talk about in this episode today, but we have been off for a while. So we're going to recap some of the stuff we were talking about and then also intro some of the new stuff we're talking about while continuing the DC movie watch series we have going on with Batman Long Halloween Part 1. Part 1 was very long, very dense. And by long and dense, I mean it's like an hour and a half, but it's like a murder mystery type deal. There's a lot going on, a lot of plot points, a lot of characters going in and out. So I only watched Part 1 instead of Part 1 and Part 2. So we'll save Part 2 for the next episode. Where we're going to wrap up X-Men 97. But we're also going to talk about something that just came out, which is the newest season of My Adventures with Superman, Season 2. So we're going to talk about everything that happened in the first couple episodes of Season 2, My Adventures with Superman, how I'm feeling about that, how I felt off of Season 1 versus where we're at in Season 2. So we'll get to those things. Then we're going to talk about the abundance of anime that we have this season. And then I'm going to choose a couple that we're going to focus on. So we'll briefly touch on One Piece, briefly touch on, what is the other one? My Hero Academia. But the ones I'm going to focus on, Demon Slayer, newest season. We'll talk about that. Kaiju number 8, which is a new anime. I don't believe we talked about it. If we have, it was very early on. We're now like 8 or 9 episodes deep into the season, so we'll give a pretty good recap about that. And another anime that I know I haven't talked about on this podcast, we're going to talk about Re-Monster. Okay, an anime that I got recommended by one of my subscribers on Twitch. So I've been watching that and I want to share some of my thoughts on that anime. And speaking of Twitch, okay, if you guys were following the Twitch channel, twitch.tv/armeddarkmamba, you guys would have known about the break that I was taking for my wife's birthday and how it has been extended to the podcast side. Also, follow Armed Dark Mamba on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, I believe. We still do that. And then you can follow the podcast on TikTok, on YouTube, Nerd Vibes Podcast. You can also follow on Spotify. Anywhere you can listen to your podcast, Nerd Vibes is going to be available. If you are watching right now, watching on YouTube, thank you for watching on the YouTube. I appreciate it. If you're listening, thank you to wherever you're listening to. Armed Dark Mamba, Nerd Vibes Podcast on all social media platforms. Look for it. Like, comment, subscribe, interact with the content. It's greatly appreciated. And it allows me to keep doing what I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, just giving you guys a life update intro on what we're going to be doing in the podcast today. We are going to talk about, let's see here, what do I have? We're going to talk about Superman Season 2, the first couple episodes next, then Batman, and then we're going to have a deep discussion on X-Men 97, the entirety of Season 1. We're going to focus on the last 2 episodes, episodes 9 and 10, and then we'll have a deeper discussion on the whole season as a whole. My thoughts, my feelings, everything about that, because there are aplenty. So stick with me after this break, and we will talk about all of that. All right. So we are going to be talking about Superman, My Adventures with Superman, streaming on Max, Adult Swim, HBO, whatever you guys are watching it on. I watch it on Max. Okay. And then we're going to talk about Batman Long Halloween. First, I do want to issue spoiler warning for My Adventures with Superman Season 2, Episodes 1 and 2. We are going to be doing a recap review, my thoughts, but it is going to be with spoilers. Okay, so and then also spoiler warning for Batman: The Long Halloween. That movie has been out for a couple of years now, but if you haven't seen it, we are going to spoil it. Talk about it. Okay, we've been talking about X-Men 97, but I'm going to issue another spoiler warning once we get there. But just a general spoiler for the podcast. Anything we talk about on the podcast, I will spoil. Okay? If you don't want to listen to it, feel free. I understand. But we are going to have a spoiler inclusive discussion about right now My Adventures with Superman. So let's first off start with My Adventures with Superman Season 1, how I felt about it. There were some issues with the animation. I thought that it looked unfinished in spots. I thought that it was jarring and took me out of the story at times. We talked about that. But as far as the characters, I loved the character of Jimmy. I loved the character of Lois. At times, they did get lost in the story in Season 1, but at the end of the season, they were able to find their way and make their own kind of road in the story so that their storylines are intriguing and kind of impactful outside of Superman. Jimmy has Flamebird, and how he sold that at the end of Season 1 to Daily Planet. So now he is a multi-millionaire, whatever it is. He has a lot of money, and he has that company inside of the Daily Planet that he now runs, which gives him his own storyline, and that plays a factor into Season 2. Lois has everything that's going on with her dad, who is the former general of Task Force X, and how his decision at the end of Season 1 to let Superman go at the request of Lois, his daughter, and where he's at in Season 2. So that's kind of Lois's storyline and what she has going on. And then you have Superman, while also dealing with Lois's situation, has his lineage being discovered with his father and all the alien tech, Kryptonian tech being stolen from various, ships and stuff that have been that Superman has interacted with. All the tech being stolen by Task Force X and being repurposed to outfit their soldiers for combat using the Kryptonian tech. So that's kind of the end of Season 1, going into Season 2 where we're at. But Season 1, like I said, I love the characters. I love where the point in which we are picking up with Superman's storyline. He is very young in his Superman life, so he's still learning about his powers. He's still not in full control of his powers, which I like. I like that he's not just an all-powerful behemoth yet. He's still losing a lot of fights. He's not taking full advantage of his powers in real combat situations yet. We're getting to see this version of Superman grow with the characters around him, with Jimmy, with Lois, but in a different way, obviously, in terms of him using his powers and who to protect, what to protect, his feelings, still trying to balance his Superman life with his Clark Kent life. You have that aspect. So I do believe that this story for Superman in particular is really, really good. I generally do not like Superman, but My Adventures with Superman is a fresh take that I'm very much enjoying. The suit, I know I had problems with it in Season 1. It's grown on me, in Season 2. You kind of don't notice the underwear anymore. I still do wish that they went with the New 52 style suit. I understand why they didn't. That's just personal preference at that point. I like Lois's character design with the shorter hair. She has an ethnic background as opposed to the general depiction of Lois, which is a white woman. We talked about this all in Season 1 as well. And Jimmy being an African American character is awesome for me. I think it adds some diversity without taking away from the story. Jimmy is a how do I say it? Jimmy's a important character, but not a primary character, if that makes sense. So him being a different race is not going to change his storyline too much. So it's just a nice place to include some diversion or diversity, not diversion, some diversity into the storyline. As far as our Superman, he is the same personality traits that I equate with Superman in general, which is the blue-eyed Boy Scout. He's save everybody at the expense of himself or whatever. He's the epitome of what you want a hero to be. And I understand that is appealing to some people. To me, it's not as appealing, which is why I like the time that they chose this Superman being young in his superhero-ness, I guess, in his superhero-ness. So that he's not the fully realized beacon of hope that he eventually becomes, and that I find just so much. But like I said, I'm enjoying this story. I'm enjoying this version of Superman. The animation doesn't bother me as much. It still has those unfinished parts that I talked about. But like I said, now that I realize it's an animation choice, even though I don't like it, I've accepted it. So I don't have that much of a problem with it. It doesn't take me out of the story as much because in these first 2 episodes, it hasn't been a lot of background scapes or anything that were unfinished, which is what it was in season 1. So it hasn't been that bad. And if it has, I haven't noticed it. So I guess that's a good thing as well. But yeah, we're going to talk about Batman next. But Superman season 2 so far, it's looking really good. There's 3 episodes in. I've only watched 2, so we're going to save the next 2 episodes for the next podcast, and then we're going to talk about Batman the Long Halloween next. And the difference in why I prefer Batman's character type to Superman's character type is what we see in Batman the Long Halloween Part 1, which is it's dark, it's gritty, it's a good representation of the opposing side to Superman, which is why they're always linked. I know these two properties aren't technically linked, but the characters will always be linked. So in Batman the Long Halloween, we pick up with a young Batman. Seems like young in his transition to being more Batman than Bruce Wayne. We have Harvey Dent, which, if you're familiar with Batman lore, you know who Harvey Dent turns into. That happens in this movie. We have the Joker is here. We have a Solomon Grundy sighting. But the overarching plot of this movie is that there is a criminal who is eliminating people on holidays specifically. So it starts out on Halloween. Someone is eliminated. It's a mob boss, I believe, or a son of a mob boss, and they believe it is the opposing family. So Batman, Commissioner Gordon, and Harvey Dent try to solve the case. Basically, they get close, and then I think the next holiday is Thanksgiving. Someone gets eliminated on Thanksgiving. So now Batman's starting to question, what do we have here, actually? Because this seems like a little bit more. Next holiday comes up, someone else taken out, so on and so forth. The Joker is in this movie for some reason. It didn't fully make sense to me on why he was there. But I always welcome the Joker as a character. He does nothing less than provide chaos at the very least. So that was good. But that's what I mean by there was a lot of other things that were woven into the plot of this movie to kind of throw you off the scent of what's actually happening. You did have a Solomon Grundy part where a henchman wanders into the sewers. Solomon Grundy is living peacefully in the sewers, so he's rightfully upset that someone comes in there. He starts taking care of the henchman. Batman comes in there, saves him. That's how we get a Solomon Grundy. Batman then returns to Solomon Grundy on Thanksgiving to give him a plate of Thanksgiving dinner. Very nice of Batman. I thought it was a good touch. But we have the Solomon Grundy point which seemed a little unnecessary based on the overarching plot of the movie. But again, I think it was there to throw you off. We have the Joker coming into this movie. I don't, like I said, I don't know why he was there. It seems like the Joker was there to work the other side of the case, but from a criminalistic standpoint, where he wants to know who is committing all of these murders on the holidays, because he doesn't know either. So he's saying like, "Oh, I'm just like you, Batman. Like I love a good puzzle as well." So that's kind of why the Joker was in, but the Joker just starts like taking people out kind of randomly and not actually trying to solve it, but more so just trying to take out the person doing it because he wants the headlines for himself. So that kind of seems just a bit much for the Joker to be in the movie, but again, it's a plot point that's supposed to distract you from the overarching plot of the movie, which is someone is taking out people on holidays specifically. You have the Harvey Dent situation where he kind of gets involved. I think by the end of the movie, he becomes Two Face, but I'm not sure. He has the double sided coin, that whole situation. In this movie, I thought was very interesting. He has a wife and he wants to have a family with this wife, but this wife is, it seems like she's not able to get pregnant, and that seems to be a sore spot in their relationship, which is why Harvey Dent in this movie has taken up a district attorney, excuse me, and it's taking a lot of time away from him being home, and that's an issue for his wife, especially since they've recently discovered that she's not allowed to have kids, and that's put a strain on their relationship. So that storyline is going on. She also is, I think, targeted at some point by some of the people going against Harvey Dent. So that's a factor for him. He saves her from his house exploding, which is, I believe, how he got the scars on his face. But again, it's not revealed at the end of the movie. And they still, at the end of the first movie, the Long Halloween Part 1, which is obviously why there's a Part 2, they never find out who's doing the holiday killings. So we got to watch Part 2 to figure out the mystery of that one. But in terms of a movie, I thought it was well paced. Again, the story got a little convoluted with the amount of characters that were in it versus the overall overarching storyline. But this iteration of Batman in this universe, I think, is again similar to the Superman TV show. In this movie, we're getting Batman at a good point where the Joker is an established villain for him. He has some other established villains, but not everyone in his rogue gallery is there. So, we don't have Two-Face yet. I don't think we have Bane yet. So there's a couple more missing in his rogue gallery, which means he's still pretty young in his Batman career as well. So I like that we're getting him early on. And you got to remember, in the movie universe, the Tomorrowverse that we're watching all these movies in, Batman and Superman have not met yet. Superman and the Flash have met, but Batman has not met those two yet. So they're still forming the team in the overarching Tomorrowverse of what we're watching. The Justice League has not been formed yet. So we're getting Batman pretty early. And I'm anxious to see the Long Halloween Part 2, mostly because I want to see if this Joker storyline has a little bit more legs to it than what we saw in Part 1, and a little bit more just information to why the Joker is even involved in the first place, outside of just pure chaos. But then again, that's Joker's character, just to be involved, So, but I'm hoping we get more explanation on that. And obviously in Part 2, we're going to hopefully figure out who the holiday killer is so that we can get that established. But we're going to stay tuned for Part 2 on that one for Batman the Long Halloween. But that brings us to our next topic, which is amazing. The X-Men 97. We're just going to talk about X-Men 97 And the overall achievement, I believe, X-Men 97 was. We're going to talk about the whole season, particularly the last 2 episodes. Stay tuned, because we're going to talk about that after this. Now, we are going to talk about something that I didn't think was going to be as good as it was. Let's be real. Okay, I grew up with the original X-Men show in the 90s. Okay, I've seen the original. I watched most of it, last little bit of it before X-Men 97 came out, just to refresh myself. And we're going to talk about what happened in episodes 9 and 10 really quickly. And then we're going to do an overall general recap, my feelings, thoughts, all that on the show, okay? So, in episode 9, we get Professor Xavier comes back. Everyone is back in their original positions, meaning Cyclops is back as the leader of the team. We got Jean back right next to Cyclops. Wolverine, Beast, Morph, all those are back in their original positions on the team-wise. Professor Xavier is back running the X-Men. Magneto is back opposing the X-Men. So everyone is back in their original positions, okay? We have Magneto, who at the end of episode 8 sent a gigantic EMP across the Earth, which blacked out the entire Earth. So we pick up episode 9, where all the governments around the world are dealing with that. All the people, everyone is dealing with no electricity around the world right now, and it is causing the world to be thrown into chaos right now because nobody has anything going. Okay. Magneto also disrupted Earth's magnetic field, so that's a big issue as well. Okay, they're having potential to have a earth-shattering cataclysmic event due to what Magneto has done because of the attack on Genosha. Okay, let's see what else we get. We got Bastion can talk to machines. That's how he has technokinesis, the ability to communicate and talk with machines. That's how he gets all the Sentinels and the people to turn into Sentinels and all that kind of stuff. That's how we get into the situation. Not important. Morph turned into the Hulk. I just want to mention it because I thought it was a really, really cool moment. Wolverine actually tries to kill Magneto. Magneto, in return, rips all the metal out of Wolverine's body. And that's where we end episode 9. Okay, pick up episode 10. Right after Professor X did a mind blast to Magneto after he ripped all the metal out of Wolverine. We start episode 10 in a bar scene with Magneto and Professor X, which seemingly is a flashback about one of the first couple times that they met, and they revealed to each other that they were mutants. And then you have the reveal that it's actually taking place in Magneto's mind. So Professor X had to use his power to stop Magneto. He also has to use his power to force. He also used his power to force Magneto to restore all the electricity on the Earth and the magnetic field and all that kind of stuff. While this is all going on, the Phoenix comes back to help the X-Men defeat Bastion on Earth. Okay, that helps them momentarily. Bastion comes back, goes to Asteroid M, where the other X-Men, Professor Xavier and Magneto, are. Okay, Professor Xavier and Magneto are knocked out. Magneto has lost his memory, so Professor Xavier is trying to help him get it back while they're inside Magneto's mind. This is all happening with them. Outside, Bastion speeds to Asteroid M to try to blow it up so that he can hurl Asteroid M at Earth, destroy all the human life on Earth so that he can live with his Sentinel beings and bring on a new future, all that kind of stuff. So Rogue, I wanted to mention this, it got her get back on Bastion for killing Gambit, which was an amazing moment, a very tear-jerking moment. I actually shed a couple tears in that moment for some of the things that Rogue said, so I had to highlight that. Professor Xavier and Magneto are having a very, very emotional back and forth inside of Magneto's mind. Magneto, once he realizes what Professor Xavier has done, is very offended, feels very violated by Professor Xavier, but Xavier has to explain to him what they're doing, why Professor Xavier is in his mind when he knows how Magneto feels about that. He explains to him that he's his brother. He's always going to be there for him. And if they are to perish, they're going to perish together. It's a very emotional back and forth between Magneto and Professor Xavier. I wanted to highlight it because it was, some people liken it to relationship talk. I could see that, but I just thought it was two guys who shared a very specific bond between themselves, and that's the relationship that was being called upon in that moment. Let's see. So, okay. I also want to touch on this because Cyclops tried to use what's called talk no jutsu, which is what we call in Naruto, because Naruto always tries to talk down his opponents before he ultimately defeats them. He tries to get them to see the error of their ways and all that stuff. Cyclops essentially does the same thing in this moment with Bastion, tries to appeal to Bastion's humanity. And Bastion at this point is like, are you serious? You really think that you're going to appeal to my humanity at this point? So it doesn't really work. They end up taking him out, but Asteroid M is seemingly destroyed. It disappears. And the X-Men, excuse me, have something in my eye real quick. So Asteroid M is gone. It's disappeared, and the X-Men are seemingly gone, perished. But we find out later that they have just been thrown in time. Scott and Jean have been thrown into the future, whereas the rest of the X-Men team, which is Professor Xavier, Magneto, Beast, Wolverine, everyone else, has been thrown into the past, specifically into ancient Egypt, where we get a glimpse of who is seemingly Apocalypse. And so that's how we end season 1 of X-Men 97. So now that we have recapped all of that, I just want to give my thoughts on the season as a whole, how it made me feel, like the characters, the choices, all these kinds of different things. First off, the intro. The intro is very nostalgic. It's slightly different from the original 1990s version, but it's close enough to where I was watching it in my living room while my wife was cooking, and she mentioned that, hey, this intro is actually very nostalgic because I used to watch the original X-Men 97, the original X-Men in earlier parts of our relationship. I would watch it. So she was like, the intro song is very nostalgic for me. And I was like, yeah, it's slightly different, but to bring that memory up for her using the intro where it's slightly different, but still similar enough to elicit that kind of response is very good. I thought the carrying on the intro style where you have the character spotlights, quick character spotlights for who's on the team. By the beginning of the season, they had, the original team, Gambit, Jubilee, all those people. Towards the end, they replaced Gambit because he died. They replaced Gambit with Nightcrawler. Morph was inputted into the intro where he wasn't towards the end in the original version. So I liked that. I also liked at the end where they had the video game like menu and it would highlight the characters and what their powers were. That was especially helpful for Morph because when Morph would use his powers, it was very confusing on how his powers worked. I know that's getting into more of a character study, but that menu helped me understand Morph's powers towards the end. So at the end of the episode, if you watch the credits, it highlights each character, and it says Morph has the ability to take on the physical characteristics of anyone he inhabits. And the way that was explained is if he takes on the Hulk, he can take on the Hulk's characteristic of his strength because the strength comes from his muscles, and like he can, morph his muscles to that same level as the Hulk's. He just can't imitate any of the Hulk's actual like powers, if that makes sense. Just the physical prowess that the Hulk possesses. Same thing with Quicksilver. When he transformed into Quicksilver, he was able to run fast because of the muscle fibers that he was able to replicate in Quicksilver. And that's a physical ability. Uh, Now he couldn't take the abilities of someone like, let's say, Cyclops, because if he took over Cyclops, he wouldn't have the eye beams because that's a power, not a physical ability. Or let's say like Wolverine, he wouldn't have the animanium, aluminum. You know, he wouldn't have the metal claws because that's not necessarily. Well, he might based on the physical abilities. Maybe that's not a good example. He wouldn't have, let's say, Jean. If he did Jean, he wouldn't have Jean's telekinesis because that's a power. It's not a physical ability. So that's how Morph's powers were explained. I also liked the specific characters they decided to focus on the whole season. They focused on Scott and Jean's relationship. They focused on Storm and Storm's identity crisis. You know, they focused a little bit on Jubilee and Sunspot. Sunspot in particular having to deal with his parents not accepting him being a mutant, which is a great storyline in itself. Talking about acceptance and what you have to do when your parents or your authority figure doesn't accept who you are as a person, especially when there's nothing that you can do about that. So that was a great storyline. You dealing with the multi-layered aspect of the people who are scared of mutants. So you have the humans who are scared of mutants, but also want to. Some people want to coexist with mutants, and some people just want to get rid of them. You know, then you have the Magneto side, which is, I don't want to coexist with humans. The mutants are the superior species. We should be dominating them. And then you have the Professor Xavier angle, which is we need to coexist with the humans. And coexisting is a difficult prospect, but we need to go through those growing pains to get to a world where we can all coexist. Now, in episode 9 and 10, we get Magneto returning to his villainous ways. And one of the reasons is he feels Charles is indirectly responsible for Genosha because, in his words, I tried it your way and look where we are. You know, he tried to make peace with the humans. He tried to do what he could in walking in Charles's footsteps, so to speak. And it led him down the path of what ended up to be a kind of genocide. And, you know, for Magneto, that brought up a bunch of memories of when he was younger, having to go through what he went through with his history of the Holocaust and everything of that, like that nature. So for him having to relive that trauma, he indirectly blamed Professor X for taking him off his course. That he ultimately knew in his heart was right for him, and he knew that there is no coexistence. We can't coexist with normal humans. They don't want us. And he felt betrayed by Professor Xavier in these last couple episodes in a multitude of ways. Rogue at one point decides to go with Magneto. Sunspot also takes Magneto's side in this conflict. It's a devastating moment when Rogue decides to go with Magneto because she directly blames Professor X for Gambit dying, even though he wasn't there. But you know, she thinks that Professor X's idealism is partially what got Gambit killed. So she goes with Magneto. Sunspot, his reasoning, in my opinion, is a little bit more flimsy. We don't have a lot. He was basically just like, my mom turned me into the Sentinels, so I just want to go against the Sentinels. I want Sunspot's story to get a little bit more layered and a little bit more complex, but that's looking more towards season 2. Season 1 was more of a, let's wrap up the old storylines from the original series while also propelling these characters forward in a real and meaningful way. We got, like I said, the Scott-Jean relationship and how that got really, really complicated towards the middle of the season with Jean's clone, and the clone having the baby, which turned out to be Cable, and how Cable comes back and he's not looking at Jean as his real mother because his real mother is the clone. But toward by the end of the season, like it gets really messy. But throughout that whole situation, you get character growth from Cyclops, Scott, because he is reconciling with the death of his presumed wife, but definitely the mother of his child. He has to deal with her death. He has to deal with the realization that the mother of his child was not actually the woman that he thought she was, and has to deal with when did that switch happen? When did Jean end and Madeline begin, and vice versa? So he's dealing with that emotional trauma. Jean is also dealing with that emotional trauma from her side, not knowing what memories are real, what memories are fake, what memories are hers, what memories are from Madeline. I like that they basically sidelined Wolverine for this whole season, and they had him basically just spot hit. And when he came in, his moments were quick, they were meaningful, but they weren't prolonged. We all know that Wolverine is one of the most popular Marvel characters, let alone X-Men. So putting him on the shelf was a risky choice, and focusing on other maybe lesser known characters like Jubilee, like Sunspot. It was a choice. I liked the character of Sunspot. I've never been a Jubilee fan, but I do like how she kind of got a little bit of a power up in this season. In her episode, she met a future alternate version of herself and got some different ways to use her powers other than shooting sparklers at you, which if you can make Jubilee look a little bit more cool, that'd be great. And then focusing a lot on Storm and Storm's relationship to her powers in particular is, I thought, was a very very good narrative choice, because Storm is one of the most powerful mutants in all of X-Men, and she is never treated that way. I, it's unfortunate that even in this season she wasn't treated that way, like she was one of the most powerful mutants. She would often, even when she did have her powers, because there was a point where she didn't have her powers in this season. Even when she did have her powers, they weren't using them to their fullest extent, because I mean, let's be real, if Storm really used her powers in the way that she could, she would be devastating. She is an Omega level mutant on par with her powers as Magneto is with his powers, and they just never show her that way. But she did get a storyline dedicated to her, which is really good. Another character I wanted to see more from was Beast. Beast always feels like the outcast on the X-Men because he's the scientist, the uh, intellectual on the team, and when he does have combat prowess, but it's not as high as everyone else on the team. So he tends to be left out when it's a very battle heavy situation. He was vital in these last two episodes, episodes 9 and 10. He was vital in him and Forge in coming up with the way to take out Bastion. He was also very vital getting the X-Men team that was on the ground up to Asteroid M to continue the fight with Bastion. But other than that, he didn't really have any moments to me, and that's unfortunate because Beast is one of my favorite X-Men. But he just, in the way this season was set up, he wasn't able to have a lot of moments because of the things that they were dealing with, the threats that they were going against, so on and so forth. But I'm anticipating next season Wolverine to be a bigger part, Beast to be a bigger part. Also, I want a bigger part from Morph now that Mr. Sinister has been seemingly taken care of. I want Morph to have a bigger part now that his psychological tormentor has been taken care of. Hopefully, he can branch out and be more of a vibrant and well-rounded character than he has been, and as opposed to just providing a cameo here and there. Him getting more dialogue, the relationship between him and Wolverine being explored more. I'm interested in that. So overall, X-Men 97, I feel, is, we do out of 5 ratings here, and it's a 5 out of 5 for me. I think that it is one of the greatest animated TV shows I've seen in a while, in terms of story, in terms of action, in terms of all the different plot points being like you kind of go in a straight line to start and then it branches out into so many different storylines, and then towards the end it closes right back up into a nice tidy little situation, but also is primed for the expansion for the next season. So I think it's just perfectly done. The animation style was close enough to the original to where you can feel that nostalgia, but it's different enough to let you know that it's a new thing. Same thing with the intro, same thing with everything. You get the vibes, but it's not a it's not a one for one. And that's something that I definitely appreciated, and I'm looking forward to season 2 of X-Men 97. And just amazing, just amazing. Everything I could have asked for in a show that is recreating, redoing, reimagining something that I fell in love with as a kid. It did everything for me and more. And I'm glad that everybody loved it. So on the other side of this break, we're going to be talking about anime, Star Wars, all that other kind of stuff. See you guys soon. All right, so let's talk about anime, because what a time again it is to be alive for an anime fan. Okay, One Piece. I'm gonna touch on it quickly. It's still going. It's still popping. We're in the Egghead arc. But the episodes that I've watched in the anime, there have been some moments, but nothing of real significance that I really want to talk about and deep dive into on the podcast. So, but I just want to say, One Piece still the goat. You know what it is. We're good. All right. So One Piece is still good. My Hero Academia, I want to talk about it at a later time, but the newest season has come out, and the first couple episodes have been gas. Just amazing. Stars and Stripes, I liked her as a hero. I liked her quirk. It was really, really unique. I liked how when she used it towards the end and that finishing move, it was very, very surprising for me as someone who hasn't read the manga. For her to use her quirk in that way was really, really cool. Shigaraki continues just to be a problem, and I just enjoy his character. I enjoy that he is in a constant struggle between him and All for One, uh, like for control of their mind and the body. I find that very fascinating. Deku and the heroes, like they're cool. All that's cool. Finding out who the UA traitor was, like that was like all right. But really, the most intriguing things happened in those first 2 episodes of the newest season for me. So I didn't really want to deep dive other than to talk about those few points. But My Hero Academia is heating up in a really, really good way. So I just didn't want to like discount that anime, but it is really good. Just I don't want to talk about it here on the podcast. I do want to talk about Demon Slayer and Kaiju number 8 real quick, because Demon Slayer 1, I just tapped into it recently, the newest season, the Hashira training arc, because I let it build up a couple of episodes because I went and I saw the movie, the Hashira training arc movie. Those first couple of episodes in the newest season are kind of a regurgitation of what you saw in the movie with a few added scenes that are anime only, not in the movie. So I kind of wanted to just watch those to get the extra little bit of context that's going to be in the anime that the movie left out, and then get to the newer portions of it, which happen to be the parts where Tanjiro goes and talks to Giyu, and gets him back on board with the Hashira training, and then we get to see Tanjiro going through some of the different Hashiras. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this was because in the movie and in the first couple episodes, we get to see the Infinity Castle that I do not know the Hashira's names, so I'm just gonna refer to them by their element. So we have the Snake Hashira and the Wind Hashira. Get to see inside the Infinity Castle, and that's kind of what takes us into the mystery that the Hashiras are dealing with. And then you have Tanjiro, who his mission so far has been to first get Gyu back in line with the Hashira training, get him to train with the Hashira to work through whatever he was going through that prevented him from training, which we found out later was because he never passed the final exam to be, or he never passed in his mind the final exam to be a demon slayer. That's where we get the storyline that's tied up from the ghosts that were training Tanjiro when he was first trying to be the water Hashira, when he was using that style and he was going through the training with the rock and everything in the very beginning of season 1. So we get that, we tie up that loose end with Gyu, and he's now back in line. And then we see Tanjiro having to go through his physical training with Tengen. We get to see Tengen, his 3 wives again. We get an update from them about what's happened since, and they all ask Tanjiro to defeat Muzan. You know, Tengen has lost a hand, lost an eye. He retired from being Hashira after the Entertainment District arc incident, and his wives are very happy about it. But again, Tengen came back to do the training because he misses being a demon slayer. He misses being in combat. He misses all those things. But with him being a diminished version of himself, he knows he can't perform on that level to where he could fulfill his Hashira duties. So he had to retire. Plus, he has 3 wives, which seemingly none of the other Hashira have a significant others of any kind. So that was a factor for him retiring as well. But he's back training, so we get to see Tanjiro go through the physical portion, which is him, and then I believe the second portion is him with Maurizio, the Mist Hashira, learning sword techniques, and then he goes to, who does he go to after that? He goes to someone else that he's already like encountered. I want to say it's not. I think he goes to Shinobu next or something like that. Yeah, I think it's Shinobu, the butterfly that he had with the girl Hashira with the pink and green hair. That was with the love Hashira. That's what she is. He goes to her last, and that's kind of where I ended off. But Demon Slayer, the point that I really wanted to talk about in terms of the animation and everything being Demon Slayer level is there was a scene where the Mist Hashira goes to the training ground where the Wind and the Snake Hashira are, training with each other, and they all get busy. And it's our first, or I don't know about other people, but it's my first time getting to see Hashira fight each other, and the Snake and Wind Hashira went 2v1 versus the Mist Hashira because the Mist Hashira apparently is that much stronger than them. And they acknowledge that in that fight by requesting that they go 2v1 against him. So the animation on it was top notch. Tanjiro right there. The only thing that I wanted, and this is as a selfish fan, I wanted more Inosuke. I need more Inosuke because Inosuke provides that comic relief. I want to know how he's doing in his Hashira training because he has a freakish physique, but I feel like he would have gotten stuck at the sword portion with the Mist Hashira at the very least because he is not a refined swordsman. But maybe they don't have him doing the Hashira training because he has his own breathing style. So I don't know. But I would have loved to see more Inosuke, more Zenitsu. We got a quick flash of Nezuko, but I understand why Nezuko is on the shelf. Because, you have Muzan looking for her. So I understand why she's out of the picture while they're training. That makes sense. So there's a story mechanic why Nezuko's not involved. But for Zenitsu and Inosuke not to be more prominently featured in the first, 3, 4, 5 episodes of the season is kind of criminal to me, to be honest, because those 2 characters have a very rabid fan base, and us not getting an update on where they're at when we have Tanjiro, and it's usually those 3 together, is kind of a little upsetting to me because, like I said, Inosuke is my favorite character in Demon Slayer, and not being able to see him, kind of tough moment for me. But other than that, Demon Slayer is where it's at. It's a slow burn right now. It's a lot of things that feels like filler, even though it's not, but it's a very slow moving training arc. You're not getting the action packed episodes every now and again. I do want some more information on what the demons are doing right now, because there was mention multiple times throughout a couple of the different episodes how the activity level of the demons has dropped dramatically since Nezuko has been revealed to be the demon that can face the sun. So I want to know what's going on with the demons right now. Like, are they strategizing? Are they gathering in certain places to kind of launch a more strategic attack? Do they have information on where the demon slayers are holding Nezuko? Are they gathering information on where the demon slayers are holding Nezuko? Are they gathering information on where the actual demon slayers are, where they're training at? These are questions that I have. And again, I haven't read the manga, so they might be answered soon. But going forward, just looking ahead, these are the questions I'm asking myself here. It's a good time. It's a good time to be eaten as an anime fan, because next anime we're talking about, Kaiju number 8. This anime was pretty decently hyped. I believe it came out in May, if not late April, something like that. 8 episodes in, and I'm loving it. I think I might have talked about it before, but it's got good animation style. The story is progressing along pretty well. Our main character hitting goals in a way that I wasn't expecting. He has a goal to reach the top of the defense force with his childhood friend. I can't remember any of the characters' names right now, but it's not really important. I remember faces, not names. I'm better with. So he's trying to reach the top right there. He just made officer by the end of episode 8 after being let in as a cadet for his contributions as a human to the effort of taking down the kaiju that were in those episodes. To this point, only 2 other people know that he is kaiju number 8. There has been the introduction of kaiju number 9, which he fought, and they now also know that kaiju can take at least one. Kaiju number 9 can take on the appearance of humans. So they now know that information. So I'm assuming that that's going to factor into later on in the season when they find out that Kafka, that's his name, Kafka is kaiju number 8. Hopefully it lessens the blow and they are more accepting of it by the time he comes out and more people find out. Also, the way Kafka fights as kaiju number 8 is very reckless. I feel like later on in the season, is going to be able to use projectiles, because I think that's the next progression in his character as a kaiju. He needs to be able to use projectiles. As his human form character, he needs to be able to try to tap into some of that kaiju power so that he can stay in his human form, but maybe use some of the kaiju enhancements that he gets to better perform in his human form. Some of the other characters, the captain is extremely powerful. She definitely remembers her and Kafka's promise, which is really, really good. The vice captain, giving me real Levi Sasuke vibes. If he shows out the way he did in, I want to say that's episode 7, where he's fighting kaiju number 8, and he's just going blow for blow with the blades, and I like his fighting style. Those kind of characters get me every time. So I'm intrigued by that character. I want to see more from him, vice captain. Some of the other secondary characters that are with Kafka, the girl, I wish I remembered her name too, but she hasn't really done much, to be honest, and neither has his buddy, besides taking on kaiju number 9 to begin with. They survived, but he didn't really do much. So he's more on a I'm just trying to get stronger strength journey than and trying to keep Kafka from revealing himself as a kaiju. So that's really more his function so far, which is fine. But I'm assuming that they're going to grow these characters a little bit more going forward. But this has been, like I said, a Very fun anime. It has a lot more humor than I expected it to have. Kafka's our main source of humor, which is really good. I like my main character to be funny and humorous. But as far as like the rest of the cast of characters are very diverse, have very different backgrounds. We have like a military style guy. We have a rich tech geek kind of kid who's a cadet. We have the hyperactive like Naruto personality type, where he's like really hyper, wants to get better. We have that archetype. We have the strong girl, obviously, and then we have the up and coming hard work, no real like gifts kind of character. So we have a diverse cast of characters behind our main character and behind our two side characters, if that makes sense. So we have our main character, two side characters, and then the cast behind them. The cast behind them isn't well fleshed out, but they're not stiffs back there. You kind of care about what they have going on for the minimal amount of screen time that they're going to have. So it's really all you can ask for in a show like that. So Kaiju number 8 is really really good. And speaking of monsters, Kaiju are just another name for monsters. We have the anime that I was turned on to by my Twitch subscriber, Remonster. And before we talk about this anime, I need you guys to know, if you go and watch it, it is a little sexually suggestive. Okay? You don't really see anything, but it is very sexually suggestive. Okay? Remonster is a story about a guy who has a life as an assassin. He takes people out, and once he takes people out, he has to eat them to gain their abilities. He dies in that world and gets reincarnated as a goblin in this new world. But he keeps the ability to eat his prey and gain their abilities. So this anime moves very fast. Okay, we are, I want to say, 8 or 9 episodes in, and in the anime 100 days have passed, and our main character, has evolved 3 to 4 times in this 120 some odd days. And the main reason for that is because he has killed a lot of prey, and the prey that he kills, he gets their abilities, so it makes him a stronger combatant. He has a lot of different abilities that a lot of different enemies are not prepared for, which makes him a very formidable foe. And then once he fells those enemies, he repeats the process. He eats them, gains their abilities, and then thus becomes stronger, which is how he keeps evolving, because he keeps getting more and more and more abilities, which cause him to up his level in this world, and then he continues to evolve. All right. He has, in this time, built civilization. He has gotten other goblins to evolve with him, which apparently in this world is a very rare situation. He's gotten a bunch of different races to accept the goblins, which in this world, again, is something that is very, very rare. The elves accept him, the humans accept him, and he's just kind of going around doing things. He has a very diverse community. He's built a mercenary company, so he has a money making operation for this community that he has built. He has mages, he has warriors, he has clerics, he has priests, scientists, alchemists, all these different things to help this civilization thrive, and he's at the center of it. The thing that I like about this anime is that it is very different from what I usually watch. It is not a battle shonen. It doesn't. It's not fight focused. There are fights, but the fights in this show are necessary to the progression of the storyline, and not just for random violence. For instance, one of the major fights in the first couple episodes is our main character fights a red bear, which in this world and at the time of the fight was a very formidable foe, and he lost his arm during that fight because he needed to fight that monster, defeat that monster, so that he could get stronger. And that's when he evolved, and he got a bunch of different abilities and all these kinds of things. But like I said, this happens over the course of 100 some odd days, because in the world that he's in, the goblins age very quickly. So he's aging, progressing, evolving, whatever you want to call it, at a very rapid rate that has been unseen in their race in a long time, which a lot of people now see him as a prophet, and at the very least, the chief of their tribe. Right. We ended on our main character. I can't remember his name because every time he evolves, he gets a new name. So that's why I don't remember his name. But the very end of the last episode I watched, he had impregnated a human sisters. They both had his baby, and again, since goblins age very quickly, the goblins were not getting enough nourishment to from their human mothers. They weren't getting enough nourishment from their human mothers to survive. So they had to our main character ripped off his own arm and told them, eat my arm and my blood, because his blood had regenerative properties, and just the way it was is that they had to do that for his babies to survive. And it was really weird, but it was also really, really romantic in a way. I was trying to explain it to my wife. She didn't really get it. Yeah, it's very different. There's definitely some sexually suggestive scenes in there. It's a very unique story about family, about values, about how you decide you want to live your life, what you find is important, and what it what it means to be a leader in different ways, So Remonster, really good, and I'm glad I got it recommended to me. But that's kind of the little what we're watching right now: One Piece, Demon Slayer, My Hero, Remonster, Kaiju number 8. I have a bunch of other stuff on my watch list. I'm watching this anime called Blood Battlefront Blockade. I'm watching Go-Go Loser Ranger, like so much, and it is a great time to be an anime fan. There's something for everybody, so make sure you guys find something and watch it, because anime is great. We're gonna take one more break, and then we're gonna talk about the 2-episode premiere of Star Wars: The Acolyte on Disney Plus. I'm gonna tell you guys what I thought about it. I watched it with my wife. I'm gonna share some of her comments. But yeah, Star Wars: The Acolyte, 2-episode premiere. We're gonna talk about it on the other side of this break. Time for the last segment of the episode. We're gonna talk about Star Wars: The Acolyte, the new series on Disney Plus. Okay, first I want to talk about Star Wars in general. Okay, where my Star Wars fandom is before we talk about this. Okay, I've seen every Star Wars movie. I've seen most of every Star Wars animated property. I've started Rebels. I've seen Clone Wars, the animated, all the way through. Just started Rebels. I've seen Mandalorian. I've seen Boba Fett, the live action, all of it. So I'm pretty in on Star Wars. I love Star Wars. I'm not in love with Star Wars. Okay, if I had to choose between anime, comics, or Star Wars, I'm choosing anime and comics before Star Wars. It's just where I'm at with that. But with that being said, this iteration of a live action Star Wars story is very intriguing to me for a couple of reasons. A, it's a whole new story. B, it's a prequel to anything that has already happened. So you're getting stuff that happened before anything else in the Star Wars timeline, which I find very, very interesting, because it informs, hopefully, some of the things that happened later on down the line. The other thing that turned me on to this movie was the female lead. I'm going to try not to give any spoilers because there's only 2 episodes in, and it just came out on Tuesday. So, or this past Tuesday that we watched it. I don't know when I'm going to put this episode out, but we're only 2 episodes in, so no spoilers. But I like our main character. I find the story very interesting. The villain that we've gotten so far, I found very intriguing. I like the fighting style of the villain so far. There is a big bad in the background that we're waiting on. I also enjoy seeing some of the Jedi in this time period. This is the High Republic time period, where supposedly the Jedi are supposed to be at one of their most power. This is supposed to be one of the times that they're at their most powerful as an organization. So you do get to see that in a couple of the sequences about just how Jedi in this time period use the Force in different ways than we're used to seeing, especially from the Skywalkers and similar, Obi-Wan's, Ahsoka's, all those kinds of people. So we get to see the Force used in a different way, so that's very interesting as well. But you still get the same nostalgic feeling of Star Wars, going from planet to planet, the different gadgets, the different droids, the different like starships, so you get all the nostalgic things there. You get to see some Jedi that weren't seen in any of the movies or any of the material that has been put out from Star Wars so far. So you get to see some new types of Jedi. There's a lot of diversity in this show, which I appreciated. There's a black Jedi, there's an Asian Jedi, there is multiple African American characters in this. So I'm very, very happy about the diversity of this show. And mostly that they're getting the space and the latitude to tell a new Star Wars story. Me personally, I started to get a little frustrated with the Star Wars franchise because of some of the things that happened in the last trilogy with the character of Rey and the character of Finn, and how those two characters were received in the fandom. I just kind of thought it was unfortunate, to say the least, how those two characters were received. And you're starting to see some of the discourse around this show be similar for some of the same reasons, being diversity and inclusion of different characters. It's just it kind of sucks, and that's partially why I never fully embraced Star Wars as a fandom or as a thing that I loved fully, because of the representation or lack thereof. And then when representation was trying to be implemented, the backlash that the fans put forth towards Finn, towards Rey, towards this new character in the Acolyte, some of the other new characters in the Acolyte. It just kind of sucks, and it's kind of unfortunate to see. That didn't take away from my experience, but it is something that is there in the fandom. Now, when you talk about the show, there's some different elements. When you talk about the show, there are some different elements. One of those elements being the fight scenes, the fight choreography. I felt like in the first episode, in the first encounter, it was pretty good. The combat was varied but still similar to other Star Wars properties. The villain used a very unorthodox weapon to the Star Wars universe specifically. So that was really cool to see the contrasting styles. The fight choreography was pretty good. The action sequences as a whole were very nice. I felt there were some clunky parts, but I think that's more of a function of the environment they were fighting in than the actual fight choreography. In some of the other set pieces in the other episode, there was a lot like some clunkiness, some I would say like hiccups, where like maybe the timing was just a little bit off on certain things. But it's not very noticeable unless you're looking for it. And then there are some questionable things about like, how did that character do that? What is that power? What is that character doing to prevent this action? So there are some mysteries afoot with the Jedi Order, with the Jedi's powers, and who did what in this mystery that we're exploring in the Acolyte. So overall, I felt that the first two episodes were solid enough to wet my whistle and get me intrigued with the mystery that's going forward. I did think that it did give me too much information at times, where I did feel at certain moments like, hey, this story is progressing very quickly. We're getting certain reveals that I feel like if we would have gotten them maybe 2 or 3 more episodes down the line, would have had a greater impact. That's not the way that they went. So at certain points, I felt that they were moving really, really fast, and then certain points I felt like not enough was happening. So I think they need to balance out the scales in terms of where things are happening when. But again, I'm intrigued. at what this story presents in terms of an idea and as an entry into the Star Wars universe. This is also a good entry point for people who want to get into Star Wars but feel intimidated by the amount of content that's already out. Because this is a brand new story with brand new characters, brand new lore that has yet to be explored. Whereas, you have episode 1 all the way to episode 9 and everything that's in between that's part of the Skywalker saga and like all that kind of stuff. Whereas you have this property that's standalone where you can, as a new fan, get into this, and hopefully this, if it lasts long enough, will lead into those other properties in the Star Wars universe that allows audiences to rediscover that in a very organic way. So I think it did that pretty effectively, linking, some of the stuff that we're used to in the Star Wars universe, but telling a completely new story. This story has similar tones in the beginning to Ahsoka's story in the Clone Wars, where she ends up leaving the Jedi Order. If you're familiar with that, it has similar tones there. How do I put this? You get different personalities in the Jedi, and I think that it shows the levels of seriousness that people take the Jedi Order. And it is, I think, a pretty accurate mirror to how certain members of law enforcement treat their jobs. Some people take it super, super seriously and want to follow by the book, want to do the whole thing. Some people operate in the gray areas, and some people just want to get through the day. I think that this show has shown some of the different personalities of the Jedi in a really, really cool way so far. Let's see. One other thing I wanted to touch on that my wife pointed out, and I couldn't unsee. There is one character, don't know her name, doesn't matter. She is a green character. It is not done well. She just looks like a normal woman in green paint. So I think that the makeup on that specific character could have done better. Could have been better. Everyone else I thought was really good. There's an alien Padawan who looks really good in terms of the makeup. There's, I believe, one other alien Padawan that looks really good with their makeup as well. But this green character just literally looks like they walked into, I don't know, like a paint shop and someone just painted them green. Like it didn't really, like, the makeup didn't move like it was part of the skin. It looked like it was sitting on the skin, if you understand, like, if you know what I mean. That was one like little nitpick, but other than that, I felt like the costume design was really good. The design of Pip, which is the name of the droid, not a huge spoiler, I thought that was really cool. How they had that droid designed. Other than that, I don't want to really say too much more, other than I'm enjoying the first 2 episode premiere. I thought it was really good. I will be continuing to watch this show and update you guys. Who knows? We might have a sighting from Miss Mamba on the podcast with her thoughts on the Acolyte. But this month, in terms of content, there's so much content coming out. Okay, I'm not saying we're going to cover it all, but there's a bunch of stuff coming out in the month of June. House of the Dragon, we're definitely going to talk about, because my wife definitely wants to talk about that. I want to talk about it. The Boys is coming out. The Acolyte we just talked about. There's all the anime we talked about on this is going to continue throughout June. There's another show that I'm missing that's coming out. But there's so much content in June. So we're going to have a bunch of packed podcasts for the summer, hopefully. I'm going to try to get to a better schedule for you guys, so that we can continue on the goal of uploading consistently. But yeah, June is a content month, man. I appreciate you guys being here, sticking with me, listening to the pod, watching the pod, consuming the pod. Like, comment, subscribe. Anything that you can do to help me out in the podcast would be greatly appreciated. It is Arm Dark Mamba on all socials. Nerd Vibes Podcast. Follow it. Follow it. Okay? Mamba out.